Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Machuda.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to be with you. Yes, it is time for another session of Apologetics where the rubber of catechesis meets the road of everyday life. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, and I'm Gary Machuda, your host and sensei. And we have a great show in store for you today. My good friend and fantastic author. He's written several great books. He's going to be joining us. His name is Rod Bennett. You're probably familiar with him. His books on the Four Witnesses and the Apostasy That Wasn't. Well, he has a new book out that's, I think, very timely. So if any of you are feeling down, that you think that the church is really in bad shape right now, you need to listen to this particular program because Rod Bennett's going to share his book, Bad Shepherds. And he's going to kind of put everything in historical perspective. And if you think things are bad now, you'd be surprised how bad they were in the past. So he's going to join us right after the first break. We're also going to do our regular sessions of Finding the Fallacy and Meet the Early Church Fathers. And the fallacy for today is push questions. All right, push questions. And the Early Church Father for today is somewhat of an unknown. His name is Faustinus. So it's going to be an interesting show. Lots of interesting topics and also exercises. All right. So anyway, it is cold outside. For those of you living in the Midwest, we are getting hit by extremely cold temperatures. So the Midwest Command Center is still up and running. Thanks be to God. And let's warm things up with our dojo exercises. But before I begin, realize that you are part of the program. So give us a call at 888-526-2151. It's 888-526-2151. Or if you'd like to send in questions through email, we do have a dojo mailbox, which is starting to fill up. So please, anything, whether it's questions about the faith, some way, maybe you need some help explaining an objection that has been thrown out at you by someone, or maybe just in a situation that you would like a second opinion. What should I do? What shouldn't I do? Send us an email at questions@handsonapologetics.com, and I answer all of them, and occasionally sometimes we get to bring them on the air. And so far we've had some excellent questions from the dojo mailbox, so please do so. And it's time for us to give our shout-outs on live stream, social media, on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. It's great to see everyone. Look at all the emojis just flowing at the chat room. Yes. All right. So it's great to see everyone. It's great to see familiar names out there. And, thank you for participating. And also thank you for listening to this program. We've had an enormous amount of really good guests on. And I know some of you can't listen to the program live, and you may have wanted to listen to, our interviews with some of these people. You can always download them and listen to them right off the website at the virginmostpowerfulradio.org website. Just go there and click on shows, and not only do you access all the programs of Hands-On Apologetics, but you also have all the other great programs that Virgin Most Powerful produces, such as Jesus 911, the Terry Jesse Show, and a bunch of others. That's a great resource for you. Because after all, sometimes you're at work, you don't have access to radio. Or perhaps there's not a local Catholic station, or otherwise, that's broadcasting Virgin Most Powerful. And by the way, there's nothing wrong about sending them an email and saying, hey, there's some great programs from Virgin Most Powerful. You might want to think to put it on your schedule. Spread the word. All right, we need your prayers. We need you to spread the word on social media. We greatly appreciate it, by the way, and also by your financial contributions, because even though we're doing the Lord's work, we're still in the world, which means we still have to pay bills. We still have electric bills and all those other goodies to take care of. So we thank you so much for those who have financially supported us and shared on media and prayed for us. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right, gang. Now, like I said, it's kind of a cold snap up here, although I have a feeling that in the world headquarters down in Southern California, the weather is much nicer. So let's do our workouts. Let's generate some light as well, and not so much heat, but light. The finding the fallacy for today is called push question. It's kind of a subset of complex questions or loaded questions. Okay, you'll find out the fallacies kind of overlap a bit. And so people have different names for the same fallacy, or they'll be very, very close to one another. Push questions are questions that are designed to limit direct replies in order to serve the questioner's agenda. Okay, so a push question is designed. It is the intention of the questioner to pose a question where the person being asked has limited replies that they could possibly give to the question. Okay, and by doing so, they're kind of pushing the person into their position. Okay, so actually, push questions, I think, it could be fallacious, but it also could be a propaganda technique as well. Mostly, from what I've found, it's mostly listed as a fallacy, but it can be a propaganda technique. Now, what is a push question? Well, this is actually a loaded question, but it's kind of a push question. The old, lawyer joke that says, they asked the defendant, "Have you stopped beating your wife lately?" And of course, it presumes the guilt on the other person. No matter how they answer, they're going to affirm beating their wife either now or in the past. But I think a better push question would be, for example, this happens a lot with door-to-door missionaries like Jehovah's Witnesses. They will ask questions like, "Wouldn't you like to live in a world that doesn't have any war or disease or crimes?" Now, what are you going to answer to that? Yeah, sure. Of course I want to live in that world. I mean, you'd be crazy to say no. Well, that's a push question, right? It's kind of like a question that's setting you up because it would be insane to say otherwise. If it's used consistently, it could be fallacious. And just as a side note, just to show you how your sensei Gary Machuda is crazy, I had a Jehovah's Witness that came to my door, and I developed a good friendship with him. And he would bring new trainees every now and then. And I figured, what would happen if I actually answered wrongly on one of their push questions? So they came up and they said, the economy's really bad and people are out of work. Do you think that there's something wrong with the world? And I said, no, I don't think it's bad. It's good. There's more opportunities to invest and do startup businesses, and there's lots of government money available. Anything I could think of to kind of flip it around that actually it was something good rather than bad. And I looked at my friend Bob the J-Dub, and he had this like little grin on his face because he wasn't quite sure how to handle that position. So anyway, that's I don't know even why I brought that up. That has nothing to do with finding the fallacy, but it kind of illustrates, like, sometimes you can ask questions that are so narrowly based that really it's absurd to answer otherwise. And really that's just to goad people in. And this is used a lot with advertising, especially salespeople will give you a push question. They always give you a question that you answer yes. They don't want you to say no. It's also, push questions are used in the political arena with phone calls and stuff. They'll say a candidate, wouldn't you like a candidate who does X or will prevent X? And no one in their right mind would want X, or, if it's bad, or wouldn't want X if it was good. So that's our finding the fallacy for today. boy, I'm so tempted. There's some good discussions on chat. I want to follow it, but I can't because we're coming up to the Meet the Early Church Father segment. And our early church father for today is Faustinus. Faustinus flourished around AD 380. Now, I'm going to give you a biography, but it's largely not about him, but another person that he was involved with. We know of Faustinus because we first make acquaintance with him from a early church father called Lucifer of Cagliari. Now, Lucifer of Cagliari starts a schismatic movement called the Luciferians. Now, this is not the modern version. This has nothing to do with Satanism or anything like that. Luciferians is actually kind of interesting. This guy named Lucifer, who was a bishop in the Church of Sardinia, he was a staunch defender of the Nicene Creed, the Nicene Council. And in fact, when St. Athanasius at the Council of Milan was condemned, he very heroically stood up for St. Athanasius and for the council. And him standing up led into all sorts of problems where he was basically exiled and so on. Now, here's where things kind of get a little weird. It's as Arianism, this belief that Jesus is not equal with God, as it progressed to its logical or illogical conclusion, namely that the Father and the Son are unlike in all things, the Orthodox party, the right-thinking, right theological party of Nicaea, saw an opportunity to kind of close ranks. Okay, now up until this time, there were some who kind of bought into this, that the Son is of like substance with the Father, but they were perfectly orthodox. So there was a council where those who were perfectly orthodox but liked this kind of unorthodox terminology was allowed back in the church and even retained their ecclesiastical offices, and Lucifer broke on that grounds. And Faustinus was a follower of him, and we have one writing program. So that's kind of the nutshell version. Coming up next, Rod Bennett.
If you're a listener to Virgin Most Powerful Radio, you already know about Hands-On Apologetics with Master Apologist Gary Machuda. And if you're a fan of Hands-On Apologetics, then we have some exciting news for you. This February, Sensei Gary will be leaving the Apologetics Dojo in Michigan to visit the Virgin Most Powerful Radio World Headquarters in Covina, California. And if you'll be in Southern California this February, we have more exciting news for you. Not only will Gary be doing his live show from our Virgin Most Powerful Radio studio, but he will be giving a live presentation on February 20th at 7 p.m. right here at the Sacred Heart Chapel. That's Gary Machuda speaking live on the topic of Breaking the Bible Barrier, Why Catholic Appeals to the Bible Fail, and How to Make Them Successful. For more information, call 877-526-2151 or visit virginmostpowerfulradio.org. It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands on Apologetics. Well, I'd like to welcome to the show Rod Bennett. Rod Bennett, as for many years, was the editor of Wonder Magazine, a popular Christian media journal. His writings appear in national publications as well, ranging from the Rutherford to the Gadfly to Catholic Exchange and Our Sunday Visitor. He's been a frequent host on lots of programs. In fact, I just recently interviewed Rod when I was guest hosting for Crest in the Afternoon. He has written several outstanding books, among which are Four Witnesses, The Early Church in Their Own Words, which is a bestseller from Ignatius Press, and also he helped me with manuscript for Why Catholic Bibles Are Bigger. He's written The Apostasy That Wasn't. And Rod, by the way, is a convert to Catholicism. He was a Southern Baptist faith. He entered the church in 1996. He lives... this must be an older bio because I know you don't live in Atlanta, Rod, but he lives with his wife, Dorothy, and 2 children. Welcome to the show, Rod Bennett.
It's good to hear from you again, Gary. Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Where do you hail abouts now?
Well, you know, back in 2009, we had a big flood in Atlanta, and it flooded our home. Our home was completely submerged. And so at that time, we, through some generous help from one of my family members, we got the right to build a new home on our old ancestral family home place here in the mountains of East Tennessee. In fact, this is the house that I'm sitting in speaking to you from now is only 114 years old, but it's the third house on this property. My family's been on this property. In fact, 2019 is our bicentennial year. So we've been here since 1819.
Wow. That's
We
fantastic.
live in Monroe County, Tennessee, and we've been here since Monroe was president.
That's awesome. Yeah, not very many people can say something like that. That's beautiful.
No. What's so, for a history buff to live?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, in fact, when I came over and visited once, that was awesome. It was just like diving into Americana, you know.
Well, we were glad to have you. You have to come see us again sometime.
Yes, absolutely. Certainly, I would love to be there now since it's so cold up here.
Well, it's pretty chilly here, but not so dramatic as what you've got. We're expecting a high of about 31 today. We got a couple inches of snow on the ground, but the roads are dry, and we're looking upwards towards you guys with sympathy today.
Well, appreciate it. Well, hey, your new book is out, Bad Shepherds. It's put out by Our Sunday Visitor, and by the way, I have a link on handsonapologetics.com to get this book. Rod,
actually,
tell me a little. Go ahead.
Correct you. It's from Sophia Institute Press, actually.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for correcting me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the link does go to Sophia Institute Press.
I figured it did.
Well, basically, where did you get the idea to write a book like this? Kind of give us a preview of how the book came together.
Well, obviously, it's topical these days, and that probably is the thing that gave it its final kick in the pants. As a matter of fact, my publisher asked me if I had anything to say on this particular subject, but the ruminations and the meditations that gave birth to the idea for the book are actually quite a bit older than that. Some years ago, I did an interview with Catholic Exchange where I was asked about some recent outrage on the part of some group of European bishops. And the question was framed in terms of, Rod, have things ever been this bad in the church before? And I said, well, 2 words, boy, howdy. The church is definitely in a mess right now, but, well, at one point, I put it this way in the book, the book strangely has been comforting to people, and one of the reasons is I get across the idea that whatever's going on now, it's not the end of the world,
Right.
But then I kind of hastily correct myself and say, well, okay, maybe it is the end of the world. We Christians believe in the imminent return of Christ, the second coming. So it might be the end of the world, but if it is, it's not because things have never been this bad before, because they definitely have. And what this book does is give you that sense of historical perspective that isn't meant to make you feel comfortable. It isn't meant to minimize the current scandals in any way, but it is to give a historical perspective to help people keep from panicking or getting kind of into a discouraged or burnout frame of mind, because I think Chesterton said it really well. He says Christianity has died and risen from the dead many times because it has a God that knows the way back from the grave.
Yeah.
So that was the inspiration for Bad Shepherds.
Yeah, that's an important point. Bad and worse, those are relative terms. They have to refer to something, Things are bad compared to something. And if you don't know church history, you don't have context. So it may seem like, oh, Lord, the church is just falling apart at the seams, and this is unprecedented in that, when actually, in church history, this is bad, but it's not really the worst.
Well, it's got the horrible flavor of crimes against children in it. So I think probably children have always been abused throughout church history. Anytime people are weak and vulnerable and not really capable of defending themselves, whether it's because of their nationality, their race, their political status, or just age, and any form of powerlessness has always been an invitation for the powerful to have their way. And so that's really what this is a reflection of. But those same forces have produced many ugly crises throughout the church's history.
Yeah, exactly. And, what's surprising, too, is, like I said, it was worse in the past, but I think the present situation makes us appreciate just how bad things were in the past,
Right.
Because if it's bad now, this stuff's horrible.
The subtitle for my book was 5 Eras When the Laity Thrived While Bishops Did the Devil's Work. And that's essentially what the book is, a 5-part exploration of 5 other eras. Sometimes people who buy the book are disappointed to find that I'm not dishing the dirt on the modern situation. That's not something that I'm really into, because I think things need to shake out a little more before we lay too much blame. But I sometimes disappoint people by telling them the narrative of my book ends in the year 1815. So if you're getting this book because you think you're going to hear somebody ranting and raving against current leadership, you're barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah.
Not that there's not plenty of blame to go around.
Right.
But it's essentially a book of historical narratives about similar ages when the bishops were actually responsible for many of the church's ills, not trying very hard to fix them.
Right. You said there were 5 eras. Which eras are those?
Yeah, I'll start with the little bit of a recap of the book you mentioned earlier, The Apostasy That Wasn't. That is the great Arian crisis of the 4th century A.D., the time of the Nicene Council. This was maybe the church's worst theological crisis. My publishers kind of were nervous that I was talking about theology. They say, well, most people don't understand theology very well or don't find it very compelling. Well, that's good, because in this particular case, the theology of Arianism was really a pretext for a political party to try to smooth the way for the Christianization of the Roman Empire in a way that would avert a crisis. And it was an attempt to fix on a bit of theology that might be useful for making it easier for half-converted or half-hearted pagans who were anxious to get with the new program now that Constantine was a Christian and promoting Christianity. So that the first of the 5 eras is the Arian crisis, where essentially a certain portion of the Catholic episcopate was willing to play ball, so to speak, with anti-Christian forces in order to, how would you say it, to safeguard the miracle of Christianity's legalization under Constantine. A lot of people had the idea that the bad old days of persecuting pagan emperors might come back if Constantine's experiment failed, which is why you had so many collaborators within the church in this bit of theological mischief. So that is the Arian crisis, where cowardice on the part of half-hearted bishops allowed them to deliberately let their guard down on theological error. The second era that I write about is the era I call the era of post-apocalyptic Christianity, or the Mad Max era of the church, where following the breakdown of the Western Empire, the Roman Empire in the western part of Europe, there happened what a lot of people loosely call the Dark Ages, when local control, where general control over the empire fell apart. The government of individual nations fell into the hands of local bosses and chieftains, and these local bosses and chieftains had their way with the clergy, picked and chose the men that they felt would be good Christian clergy at a time when civilization barely justified the name of civilization. And as a result, you got politically chosen clergy who were chosen for reasons other than piety and missionary zeal, let's put it that way. Some of these chieftains had good intentions. They weren't all of them just evil, but they all felt that this was a time for soldiers, not for saints. And as a result, a lot of our clergy, including popes and other bishops, their morals began to resemble those of soldiers. So, and of course, there are some spectacular horror stories about evil living popes. One of the popes I refer to as the rock star pope, and believe me, he fully justifies the name.
Yeah.
And another.
Hold it right there, Rod, because
yeah, go ahead.
We're coming up to a break. I just don't want to, start to go into the rock star pope with, and then have the music come up right before you describe this. So
okay, that's fine.
Yeah, why don't we hold that, and when we come on the other side of the break, you can describe this second era of back when things were rotten, I guess you could say. Right?
Well, you might want to use that in your lead-in.
Yeah, I should have, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you're the guest sensei today. Okay, you're listening to Hands On Apologetics. We're talking with author Rod Bennett about Bad Shepherds, his new book. You want to stay tuned, folks, because this will give you context to help you kind of assess where we are today in the church. Stay tuned.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. You know, there's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now are saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet 3 men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome, everybody. We're talking with Rod Bennett, the author of Bad Shepherds, The Dark Years, in which the faithful thrived while bishops did the dirty work, or like I was say, back when things were even more rotten. And, he divides his book. By the way, Rod, I love the chapter titles. You have Eyes Off the Prize, the Arians in the 4th century, the Age of Iron, Barbarian Bishops of the Dark Ages, Resistors of Reform, Clerical Collapse in a Disastrous 14th Century, the Catholic Protestants, the Great 16th Century Rebels, and Who Drove Them to Revolt, and the Infamous Monster, the Church That Surrendered to France. I love those titles.
Well, one tries.
Now, you were about to tell us about the rock star Pope. Now, what can you give a name and date? Like, where are we in history in this?
Yeah, I was about to go into Benedict the Ninth, who may be the worst of the lot as far as the Dark Ages bishops. He bought and sold the papacy 3 times. And he holds the record of having been Pope the most often. And he was a rascal, no bit better than the rock star Pope that we mentioned earlier. Again, maybe the less we go into the details, the better here. Some of it is pretty ugly. I try to recount it in a tasteful way in the book, while still shocking the reader to the extent that getting people to see that really horrific stories are nothing new in the history of the church. Yeah. It's a mystery. It's worth going into for a moment. When I first considered writing the book, I thought, well, maybe this is ill-advised. Maybe you might discourage people. You might people that are, considering the claims of the faith for the first time, or Catholics that are thinking about stopping going to church and things of that type. And then I thought, well, the news reports every night are doing a pretty good job of accomplishing that already. Right. What I thought we might do, though, is help people to meditate on and understand the mystery of iniquity within a body that is holy. One of the marks of the church, the classical marks of the church, is that it's holy. And you read some of these stories, and again, you mentioned them pretty well in the chapter titles. You look at these eras and you think, well, I think I would have wondered as a Protestant, what kind of a church is this that can make claims to be holy and to have a man standing in the place of Christ as the vicar of Christ on earth? How can they make those kind of absurd claims when all of this is in the historical record? Anybody can read it whenever they want to. And there is a very deep mystery at the heart of that, but it's in the Gospels themselves. Christ himself picked 12, and one of them, in his own words, was a devil. In other words, Judas Iscariot was a man who, picked by Christ, personally trained by Christ, heard every sermon in the Gospels in person, was sent out along with the 70, we believe, and to do miracles and cast out devils like the rest of them, So their intellectual difficulties, he can't have had many, and yet the Gospels tell us that the whole time he was the treasurer and he had his hand in the till, that he was stealing out of the common money bag for the group. So the mind boggles a little there. The miracle man, the miracle maker who cast out devils, who was a thief. So the mystery of iniquity inside the church as well as outside is very challenging, but it's also profoundly biblical. One of the things that was a breakthrough for me was in looking at the course of this problem through the whole Bible. Mm-hmm. A lot of our listeners remember that when the Archangel Gabriel came to our Blessed Mother at the time of the Incarnation, he said that her son would be called great and that he would sit on the throne of his father David. Well, the more you know about that throne that Jesus came to sit on, the more this mystery comes to the fore. That throne was the Davidic throne of the Davidic kingdom, and there were 39, I believe, Davidic kings, of which 31 were bad.
Right.
Some of them spectacularly bad, like human sacrifice and setting up golden calves in God's temple and things of this type. 31 out of 39. So if the crimes of the bad popes and the bad bishops would have disqualified the Catholic Church's claims to be a religion founded by Christ, then surely the actions of the bad Davidic kings have polluted the throne of David too bad for Christ to ever sit on it as well. And yet we know that he does.
Right.
So this mystery seems to be permanent among us, and the Bible seems to alert us to it in the story of Judas Iscariot, which is right at the very heart of the church's origin.
Yeah. So you could even write a second book, Bad Shepherds of the Old Testament.
Right.
I mean, and that'd probably be multi-volume.
Well, I once thought it. Well, I mean, we've kind of got that already. That's called the Old Testament.
That's true. And not only the kingship, but also the priesthood. And I mean,
even many of the heroes kind of redeemed themselves at the last minute. Samson was a wicked man and redeemed himself right at the end by repenting and pulling down the house of God's enemies around his own ears. So the Bible is very realistic. It's not a pie-in-the-sky story done up in pink and lace. In fact, modern readers of the Bible are often shocked to read all the stories of incest and adultery, and David had a man killed because he covered up adultery with his wife, and all of the rest of it. I mean, it's a pretty disedifying story if you're looking for pious, feel-good, inspiration. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people don't know what to do with the Old Testament because of that. And similarly, I think that one of the purposes I had in mind in writing this book was to sober people up a little. The purpose of the church is to be a beachhead at Normandy. We're here to save a world that's spiritually plagued with the devils, the prince of the power of the air, where there's a war on, And so religion is not here to just be a nice addition to your modern lifestyle to make you cleaner and more respectable than your neighbors. There's a war on, And as a result, there are casualties, and sometimes casualties on the good side. People who go into, I think of our, priests that have been involved in cover-up and other things during the current scandals. I think most, if not all of them, went into their work with the best of intentions, and the battle is such that there are people who don't survive spiritually, who fall, who And all of this is telegraphed to us in advance by the Old Testament. It's a story about heroes who fall at the last minute. David's throne that we mentioned a moment ago, originally, if you'll remember, was the throne of Saul.
Yeah, right.
And Saul lost his spiritual prerogatives with God because he failed at the last moment, failed under pressure. And so it's a story where we ought to expect this kind of thing, and we ought to expect, therefore, that there will be casualties. And that's the story of the bad shepherds, both Old Testament and New.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're actually in enemy-occupied territory. We're not in our homeland right now, and I think a lot of shepherds forgot that.
Right,
And
still do. A lot of Catholics.
Right.
One of the things I say in the introduction to the book is I think that I wouldn't have written a book like this except that I was a little concerned that our people have been on a cotton candy diet a little bit too long.
Yeah.
In other words, people are not accustomed to hearing about the rogues that are in this book because, naturally enough, we don't like to parade this stuff around. This is the skeletons in our closet, you know. And again, that's a natural instinct. But at the same time, if you feed people a continuous cotton candy diet, where they may start expecting bishops and popes and other leaders to be saints, instead of realizing what a struggle it is for them also,
right.
And that they're not a caste of spiritual aristocrats, and that we maybe do their struggle a disservice by imagining that it's normal to have holy bishops and priests and deacons. It's not normal. It's a struggle. It's hard. There's a battle on, and people have to exert themselves, you know, and the laity also.
Yes, that's true. In fact, St. Paul says where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And that even in these dark periods, there was great saints and great, just great holy warriors who kept the faith.
Right.
That's the other side of your story.
I do apologize in the book for the fact that I seem to that I paint such an ugly picture in the book. And I do it because, again, I feel like it's a corrective or an antidote to the cotton candy version, where you get only saints and only pious stories. Those heroes and saints mean much more when you see them against the background of the dark struggle that they were involved in. So I do apologize for leaving the saints and the victories out of this particular book. You know that I've written other books where I glory in people like Athanasius and St. Anthony and all of that. I would much prefer to be writing about the heroes, but but in this case, I felt it was time for a cold shower and 3 cups of coffee, you know, to a laity, maybe myself included, who need to sober up a bit.
Yes, absolutely. Well, hey, we're coming up to the break. When we come up on the other side of the break, let's continue talking about bad shepherds, and we can also show the victory, because we're still here, folks. We're alive and well and influential in the world. Somebody kept the faith, and by God's grace, the church continued. Talking to Rod Bennett. Stay tuned, everybody.
If you're a listener to Virgin Most Powerful Radio, you already know about Hands-on Apologetics with Master Apologist Gary Machuda. And if you're a fan of Hands-on Apologetics, then we have some exciting news for you. This February, Sensei Gary will be leaving the Apologetics Dojo in Michigan to visit the Virgin Most Powerful Radio World Headquarters in Covina, California. And if you'll be in Southern California this February, we have more exciting news for you. Not only will Gary be doing his live show from our Virgin Most Powerful Radio studio, but he will be giving a live presentation on February 20th at 7 p.m. right here at the Sacred Heart Chapel. That's Gary Machuda speaking live on the topic of Breaking the Bible Barrier, Why Catholic Appeals to the Bible Fail, and How to Make Them Successful. For more information, call 877-526-2151 or visit virginmostpowerfulradio.org. It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. We're talking with author Rod Bennett and his new book, Bad Shepherds, which is available through Sophia Institute Press. And, we're just talking about when things are rotten. That seems to be the one phrase that always sticks in my mind. But, Rod, you were saying before the break, something really profound, that we really can't appreciate what the saints had gone through unless you understand the battle in which they were engaged in, Right.
It's, I've quoted G.K. Chesterton once already, but I think I might give you another brief little quote as to how it is, the paradox that a book about such ugly topics can actually be encouraging. Chesterton said, "Men are never more awake to the good in the world than when they are furiously awake to the evil in the world. Men never enjoy so much the blazing sun and the rushing wind as when they are out hunting the devil. On the other hand, there are no people so dreary as philosophical optimists, and men are never so little happy as when they are constantly reassured. Such men have begun by calling the moon as bright as the sun, but they end only by seeing the sun as pallid as the moon. They have made a shameful treaty with shame, and the mark of it is on them. Everything is good except their own spirits." And I found that captures the paradox of what I was trying to do in the book pretty well. Yeah. It's and so far it's been really fun to watch how people say that it really is encouraging and uplifting, a story that's so full of awful folly and wrongdoing.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed it. I mean, I didn't feel like it was a downer at all. It was it was a brisk. I guess since it's cold out, a brisk breath of fresh air. Because it's you're right. It gives us context. It gives us it gives us a view of how things could go bad if people don't remain faithful and stand up for the truth. Now, you gave 5 different eras. Which era? Maybe you could describe a little bit why. Which one do you think comes closest to the state of the church today in America?
Goodness, that's an interesting question. Probably the era that I called resistors of reform. Everybody knows that the Protestants called their movement in the early 1500s, they called it the Reformation. A lot of people aren't so aware that they were using a term that everybody had been using as a catchphrase for 200 years. Everybody knew that the church was dying for reform. It needed to be reformed. Abuses needed to be uncovered, addressed directly, fixed, and that the laity needed to make sure that they were fixed. They needed to apply the kinds of pressure that the laity can provide to make the bishops do right. Again, at that time, the problems were a little different than our own. They were mainly that there were too many people in the ministry for money because it was a good living. much more so than it is today. Many of those things have been reformed. In those days, the great bishoprics had lands and that you could skim the rents off of, and palaces and castles and all the rest of it, and a large, a cleric of a large diocese would live like a prince many times. Thank goodness most of that's reformed, but that was the reform. Things that needed reforming at that time were abuses of that type, although there was sexual immorality of various types, which really underlies most of what's going on here right now too. I know many people have noted, and it's perfectly true, that even though we've called this a child abuse problem, most of it has been relations with teenage boys, and so it's a crisis of sexual immorality, a little bit different than just pure predatory. Not that a 16-year-old can give consent. We don't want to give that idea across, but at the same time, before we had the few bad apples that were willing to cross the line of being with underage people, there were a lot of bad apples who had mainstreamed unchaste priests to such a degree that these other things became possible to a minority. And the problem was very similar in the 15th and 16th centuries, leading up to the explosion of the Protestant Reformation. Abuses were mainstreamed to such a degree that most clerics, even well-meaning clerics, felt that you might do more harm than good trying to uproot it all. There were a lot of our clerics that were willing to actually defend a lot of what was going on, and they were certainly they defended it with their actions, because they just didn't do anything effective to address the problems. And there are a lot of people who are willing to mouth the platitudes today, but they're not willing to actually address the problems. And why is that? Because addressing the problems, reform, doesn't come easy. Reform is not fun, because it usually hurts. And people ask, well, why is so much cover-up going on? Well, the answer to that shortly is that there is a bonanza of lawsuits available that would make what happened to big tobacco look like small potatoes. And the church may very well lose a good portion of her property simply to lawsuits and various financial settlements and all the rest of it. And the church is going, if all the secret archives were emptied out and all of the cover-up stopped, there would be a financial bloodbath. And that's the reason why it has been resisted for a long time, and why it continues to be resisted in many corners. And so the similarities are, no abuse is so bad as the abuse that the church is willing to, the church herself, meaning us, the lay people and everybody else, are willing to turn a blind eye to. And a lot of us probably would not get all bent out of shape or worked up about unchaste priests, simply if it didn't involve an underage activity. And but the problem needs to be resolved God's way, not our way. And to have any reform, you've got to let the chips fall where they may. You have to care about reform, and you have to care about the glory of God's house, and you have to have enough pity on the poor little sheep who need to be led by good shepherds, that you're willing to let the chips fall where they may, and you're willing to bite that bullet. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but the lead up to the Protestant Reformation was a period where we as Catholics needed to reform the abuses ourselves and didn't. And what happened was the so-called Reformation that we actually got was just chaos. 1,000 mutually exclusive reformations at once that didn't fix either the actual abuses or any theological problems either.
Right. Now, we have about 3 minutes. I know one thing I want you to talk a little bit about, and this is, I think, the most horrific of the ages that you depict, is the infamous monster, the church that surrendered to France. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about what was going on there? Because I think a lot of Catholics don't know about this particular era of history.
Well, the French Revolution which had many good instincts. In fact, to begin with, the early moderate phases of the French Revolution that were somewhat similar to our own American Revolution were supported by most clergy. But as the thing grew more and more radical, and as the conservative forces of entrenched abuses in the clergy, many of the clergy, then as now, were involved with various abuses. The revolution got more and more radical until finally it really turned into a purge to try to purge France of Christianity altogether, really.
Yeah.
And as a result, it became something a lot like the early Roman persecutions. The church was suppressed, priests were massacred, the faith was outlawed. All kinds of desecrations and things happened very similar to ancient Rome, during this great terror that took place. And the real horror of it is that many of the clergy were collaborators, just like in Nazi Germany. There was a minority of Catholic priests who went along with Hitler's plans for a de-Judified Catholicism in the Third Reich. It was a minority, but not a small one. It may have been as much as 50%. Catholics, meaning both laity and clergy, simply because it was costly to go against the flow, and some of them actually believed in it. And that's what the clergy who collaborated during the French Revolution with the radical anti-Christians, many of them voluntarily renounced their orders, told their people to become atheists and, follow the state, make the goddess of reason into your god. So it really is a very horrifying story that took place much closer in time to our own era than most of the stories in the book. This is pretty recent.
Yes. Well, hey, Rod, where can people go to get information about the book and all the other great stuff you're doing?
Probably the easiest way to get the book is to go on to the website of the Sophia Institute Press. So just look up Sophia Institute. There may be a Hosea Institute somewhere. This is the Sophia Institute. And if you go there, you will easily get yourself a copy of The Bad Shepherds, and I think you might enjoy yourself with it.
Yes, yeah. Not only that book, but you've written lots of other great books.
That's
as
right.
well.
If you go on Amazon, you'll see my six or seven other books. So,
yeah, very good. Well, Rod, hey, thank you for coming on Hands on Apologetics. We appreciate it.
It's always fun, and I always enjoy spending time with you, Gary.
All right. Well, take care, my friend. That was Rod Bennett, everybody. Please do look up his works. Rod's a fantastic storyteller, and his books are really good as for apologetics and just getting a good grasp of history. Great stuff. And talk about great stuff, we have Tim Staples is coming to the Virgin Most Powerful Apologetic Dojo tomorrow. All right. So from the Lord's Gym to the dojo, we're going to talk to Tim about free will and salvation, which should be really interesting. And also Friday, Bob Hesley comes back to the dojo. He's going to be talking about the biblical foundations for our belief in the communion of saints. Bobby is an amazing master of Scripture, and so is Tim. So it's going to be the 1-2 punch here at the dojo. And, man, I can't believe the hour's already gone. It's time to turn off the lights here at the Midwest Command Center. And it's great to talk to everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the program. Coming up next, high-impact Catholic talk with the two great masters of commentary, the Terry and Jesse Show. The folks who started it all, folks. Coming up next. I'm Gary Machuda. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.